When you picture the Golden Arches, you probably think of, billions of burgers served, total global dominance, and just massive, unimaginable corporate wealth. But what if I told you the true story of the world's most successful restaurant brand is actually this wild three-act saga? We're talking brilliant invention, a super bitter corporate takeover, and ultimately, an impromptu multi-billion-dollar giveaway. Seriously, the guys who actually invented the concept, they died with almost nothing compared to what the empire is worth today. The guy who scaled it took all the credit, and his widow, she ended up giving that massive fortune away to causes he probably would have absolutely hated. It's a pretty fascinating question, right? Think about it. If you had over $2 billion, how would you get rid of it? And notice, I didn't say spend it or invest it. I mean, actively get rid of it. Well, this is the central paradox we're unpacking today. Because right behind the glowing neon of those golden arches sits the incredible story of Joan Kroc. She inherited this colossal fast food fortune and launched one of the most stunning, completely impromptu wealth redistributions in modern history. But to truly understand how she gave it all away, we first have to understand exactly how it was made and, well, who it was taken from. Act 1. The True Inventors. So our story doesn't actually begin with Ray Kroc. It starts with two brothers, Richard and Maurice McDonald. They were the sons of an Irish immigrant who worked his whole life in a New Hampshire shoe factory. After 42 years of incredibly loyal service, their dad was just unceremoniously fired. And that taught the brothers a harsh, absolutely crucial lesson. The only real security in America is ownership. So, seeking financial independence, they head out to California, and by 1940, they open a really successful drive-in barbecue stand. Now, they were doing great, but they were also total data nerds. They realized that 80% of their revenue was coming from just one single item: hamburgers. And this brilliantly illustrates why they did something completely unthinkable. In 1948, they literally closed their highly profitable restaurant for 3 full months just to completely reinvent their business. They slashed the menu from 25 items down to just 9, fired the car hops, ditched the silverware, and swapped a 20-minute wait for a 30-second walk-up window. Talk about a game changer. They called it the Speedy Service System. Dick McDonald literally went out to a local tennis court with a piece of chalk and drew out this custom kitchen layout. It was like a giant puzzle. He had his workers out there practicing their movements for days, choreographing them like dancers, just to eliminate every single wasted step. It was basically Henry Ford's assembly line, but applied to a commercial kitchen. You had one person grilling, another dressing the buns, someone else running the fryer. And with this single-task system, they literally invented modern fast food as we know it, dropping service times to just a matter of seconds. Now, you gotta understand, the brothers were absolute perfectionists. They actually did sell 21 franchises, but they kinda hated it, because whenever a franchise was too far away for them to personally supervise, the quality would slip. Franchisees would start cutting corners, and that just drove the brothers crazy. They really hated the stress of expansion. As Dick McDonald perfectly put it, they were terrified of winding up in some skyscraper with 4 ulcers and 8 tax attorneys trying to figure out their taxes. They had already achieved their goal of independence, they lived comfortably, and they actively, stubbornly refused to aggressively expand. Act 2. The Scaler's Pivot. Let's move to and see how this builds. Enter Ray Kroc. It's 1954, and Ray is a 52-year-old, struggling traveling salesman who drives all the way out to California for one reason: to find out why on earth one tiny hamburger stand in San Bernardino needs 8 of his multi-mixer machines. I mean, these things could make 40 milkshakes at the same time. His career path up to this point was completely chaotic. He lied about his age to drive a Red Cross ambulance in World War I, spent 17 years selling paper cups, and then decades selling milkshake mixers. But Kroc had this deep, burning hunger for ownership. His father had been completely ruined in the 1929 stock market crash, and Kroc was desperate to build lasting wealth. So when he finally saw the McDonald Brothers system in action, he instantly recognized its potential to scale across the entire country. So Kroc manages to convince the brothers to let him become their new franchise agent. But man, the 1955 deal he signed was absolutely brutal. Kroc earned a tiny 1.4% of gross sales, and out of that, he had to pay his own operating costs. Even worse, the contract strictly required the brothers' written approval for any operational changes whatsoever. For example, when Kroc opened his first franchise in Coldweather, Illinois, he obviously needed to add a basement furnace. Well, the brothers fought him tooth and nail on it because it deviated from their sunny California blueprint. By 1959, despite opening dozens of stores, Kroc was basically teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. The pivot, the real estate empire. Then, a former executive named Harry Sonborn comes to Kroc with a brilliant and, frankly, entirely ruthless solution to bypass the brothers' strict agreement and save the company. He looked at Kroc and said, "You're not in the hamburger business. You're in the real estate business." So the crucial point is, Sonborn advised Kroc to acquire the actual land underneath the franchise locations and then sublease it back to the operators at a 20 to 40% markup. And here's the genius part. Real estate income existed completely outside the brothers' restrictive franchise agreement. This strategy gave Kroc massive capital, hard assets to secure bank loans, and absolute total control over his franchisees. Overnight, McDonald's transformed from a struggling hamburger chain into one of the largest commercial real estate holders on the planet. Act 3, the bitter buyout. With all this newfound leverage and capital flowing in, the balance of power shifted completely. By 1961, an emboldened Ray Kroc was just entirely fed up with the brothers vetoing every single one of his ideas. He decided he needed to buy them out completely. So Kroc asks for a price. The brothers? They demand $2.7 million. Now, why that exact number? Well, they calculated it would leave them with exactly $1 million each after taxes. Kroc was absolutely furious at the price, but he begrudgingly accepted it. However, this deal came with a massive point of friction. The brothers completely refused to hand over their original, highly profitable San Bernardino location. They wanted to leave it to their loyal, founding employees. And Kroc? He viewed this as an unforgivable betrayal. But the real tragedy of this buyout is honestly staggering. It comes down to a number: $15 billion. According to the brothers and their family, Kroc verbally promised them a perpetual 0.5% royalty on all future sales, just on a handshake, supposedly to avoid complicating his bank loans. Well, that deal was never put into the written contract, and Kroc always denied it even existed. But if that handshake had been honored, the cumulative unpaid royalties today would exceed $15 billion. No way, right? And Kroc made absolutely sure to exact his revenge. Because Kroc now owned the naming rights, the brothers were actually forced to rename their original stand the Big M. So, what does Kroc do? He deliberately opens a brand new, aggressively marketed corporate McDonald's literally just one block away. He systematically choked off their business. By 1970, the Big M was forced to close its doors for good. And for the next 3 decades, Kroc systematically erased Richard and Maurice from the company's official history, basically crowning himself as the sole founder. Act 4. The Maverick Philanthropist. Okay, so back in 1957, Ray Kroc met a blonde piano player working in a restaurant in Minnesota. Her name was Joan. They both eventually divorced their spouses, married each other in 1969, and when Ray passed away in 1984, Joan inherited his massive $600 million fortune. Now, Ray and Joan had wildly different worldviews. Ray was a fierce conservative. He donated heavily to Richard Nixon's re-election and favored funding trade schools. Joan, on the other hand, was deeply progressive. And once she controlled the fortune, she used the exact same fast food wealth to fund the Democratic Party, establish university peace studies programs, and really champion nuclear disarmament. It's a fascinating contrast. A fortune redistributed. Now, what's really interesting about this is exactly how Joan chose to give this money away. You know, most billionaires set up these massive bureaucratic foundations designed to last forever, just doling out the bare minimum required by law every year. Not Joan. She hated red tape. She actually shut down her initial foundation because she felt there was just too much paperwork. She even named her yacht and her private jet Impromptu because, well, that was her entire philosophy of giving. She acted like this shadowy benefactor, just showing up unannounced to solve problems on the spot. Just look at the sheer diversity of her impromptu giving spree. She secretly watched the mayor of a flooded town on TV and anonymously distributed $2,000 checks to every single affected household. Boom, just like that. She dropped $1 million at a hotel for AIDS research. When a sick hummingbird landed in her yard, she gave $100,000 to the San Diego Zoo's enclosure. But she also went incredibly massive, famously leaving $200 million to NPR and a staggering $1.5 billion to the Salvation Army to build community centers, all while quietly rolling through her local McDonald's drive-thru, ordering a burger for her dog, and handing out $100 tips to the minimum wage workers. By the time Joan Kroc passed away from brain cancer in 2003, her net worth had grown right alongside the company, and she had effectively spent down the empire's wealth. She distributed roughly $3 billion. She absolutely refused to let it be hoarded in a trust. She genuinely believed the capital should be immediately transferred directly into the hands of the organizations actively doing the work on the ground. So let's bring this all together. The men who actually invented the system, Richard and Maurice,
They were erased from their own company's history and died with a comparatively tiny estate of around $1.8 million. Ray Kroc, the ruthless scaler who acquired the real estate, built a global empire and died with $600 million. But Joan Kroc, the maverick widow, took that accumulated wealth and pushed $3 billion directly into communities across the entire globe.
It really leaves you with a profound question. The true inventors were erased by history. The ambitious scaler built one of the greatest corporate empires ever known. But in the end, his widow took his fortune and gave it all away to causes she believed in. Next time you drive past those golden arches, ask yourself, what is the true legacy of this company? Is it the burgers, the real estate empire, or the billions of dollars that quietly built community centers and funded peace? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep asking the big questions.